Get out and never come back. My mother-in-law screamed those words so loudly that I could hear them echoing in my head long after I had walked out of her house. But it wasn't the words that stayed with me, it was the sound of her palm against my cheek. For a few seconds I couldn't move. My face burned, my eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. My father was sick. My car had broken down. I had borrowed her SUV because I had no other way to get to the hospital. And somehow I was the one standing there like a criminal. My husband Daniel was only a few feet away. He had watched his mother slap me, and the only thing he said was, "Claire, Mom's upset. Maybe you should just go." That was the moment something inside me went completely quiet. I picked up my purse, I looked at Evelyn, then I looked at my husband, and I said the words that would eventually change all three of our lives. Okay, I walked out. But to understand why I walked away without fighting, you need to know what happened that afternoon. My name is Claire Bennett, and for 8 years I had been married to Daniel Carter. We lived in a comfortable suburban neighborhood outside Raleigh, North Carolina. It wasn't the kind of place where people became millionaires overnight. Most of our neighbors worked regular jobs, raised families, paid mortgages, and worried about property taxes like everyone else. Daniel worked in commercial insurance. I worked as a project coordinator for a construction company. We weren't rich. We were comfortable. At least that's what I thought. My father, Robert, lived about 40 minutes away in a small brick ranch house. He was 71, stubborn, independent, and the kind of man who would rather suffer quietly than ask his daughter for help. So, when he called me that afternoon, I knew something was wrong. "Claire," he said, his voice unusually weak, "I don't feel very good." I was standing in my kitchen when he said it. "What do you mean, are you having trouble breathing?" "No, just dizzy. And my chest feels strange." My stomach dropped. "Dad, call 911. No, don't do that. Dad, I just need someone to take me to urgent care." I grabbed my keys. "I'll come get you." I ran outside, got into my 10-year-old sedan, and turned the key. Nothing. I tried again. Click, nothing. I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I tried once more. Still nothing. My hands were shaking. Then I remembered Evelyn's SUV. My mother-in-law lived only 15 minutes away. I called her. She answered after the third ring. "What is it? My car won't start. Dad is sick and I need to take him to the doctor. Could I borrow your SUV?" There was a long pause. "You'll bring it right back." "Yes, fine." I thanked her and drove over. Evelyn was standing in her driveway when I arrived. She handed me the keys without smiling. "Don't make a mess." "I won't. And don't leave the tank empty. I'll fill it." She stared at me for another second. "You always seem to have some emergency, Claire." I swallowed the irritation rising in my throat. "My dad really isn't feeling well." She shrugged. "Just bring the car back." I drove to my father's house. He looked pale when I arrived. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You don't have to apologize to me." I helped him into the SUV and drove him to the emergency department. Thankfully, the doctors didn't find an immediate life-threatening condition. His blood pressure was high, and they wanted to run additional tests, but they eventually released him with instructions to follow up with his doctor. By the time we left, it was getting dark. I drove Dad home first. He squeezed my hand before getting out. "Thank you, sweetheart. Call me if you need anything." "I will." I got back into the SUV and checked my phone. 6 missed calls. All from Evelyn. Then a text appeared. "Where are you?" I called her. "I just dropped Dad off. I'm coming now. You were supposed to bring my car back hours ago, I know." "I'm sorry." "He was at the hospital. I don't care." I closed my eyes. "Evelyn, I had no choice." "You always have a choice." I drove directly to her house. When I pulled into the driveway, she was waiting. Daniel was there too. I immediately knew this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. I got out. "I'm sorry about the delay." Evelyn walked toward me. "You took my car without respecting me. I asked you. You took advantage of me. I was trying to help my father." Daniel stepped forward. "Can we just calm down?" I looked at him. I agree. But Evelyn wasn't interested in calming down. "You think because you're married to my son, you can do whatever you want." "That isn't what happened." She stepped closer. "I gave you that car because I trusted you. I brought it back. You think that's the point?" I looked at Daniel. "Please explain to her that Dad was sick." Daniel looked uncomfortable. "Mom, she was worried about her father." Evelyn turned toward him. "You always defend her." Then she turned back to me. And before I could say another word, her hand came across my face. The sound was sharp. For one terrible second, nobody moved. I touched my cheek. Daniel stared at his mother, then at me. I waited for him to say something. Anything. Instead, he sighed. "Claire, Mom's upset." I looked at him. "Did you just watch her hit me?" He lowered his voice. "Maybe you should just go home." Something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. It simply stopped trying. I picked up my purse. I handed Evelyn her keys. Then I looked at Daniel one last time. "You know what?" He stared at me. "I think I finally understand." I walked toward my car, but then remembered it was still sitting dead in my driveway. So I ordered an Uber. As I waited at the curb, Evelyn shouted from behind me, "Get out and never come back." I didn't turn around. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with an ice pack against my cheek. For 8 years, I had tried to earn a place in that family. That night, I realized something I should have understood much earlier. I didn't need their permission to have a life, and I certainly didn't need their permission to walk away. What I didn't know yet was that across town, my father's illness had already set something in motion that would completely change my financial future. And within a few weeks I would make a decision that would put my new front door directly across the street from Evelyn Carter. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. For several minutes I simply stared at the ceiling. My cheek still hurt. But the physical pain wasn't what kept me awake. It was Daniel. I kept replaying the moment in my head. His mother had slapped me, and he had told me to go home. For 8 years I had made excuses for him. I told myself he was caught between his wife and his mother. I told myself Evelyn was difficult because she was protective of her son. I told myself Daniel would eventually learn to stand up to her. That morning I stopped making excuses. I got out of bed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Then I wrote down everything I owned. Our checking account, our savings, my retirement account, my car, the small investment account my father had helped me open years ago. I wanted to know exactly where I stood. Not emotionally, financially. Because Evelyn had said something that had been bothering me since the night before. Without this family, you wouldn't have anything. I almost laughed when I remembered it. She had no idea how wrong she was. But there was something I had never told her. Something I had barely discussed with Daniel. Years before I met Daniel, my father had made a decision that changed my financial life. Dad wasn't rich. He never drove a luxury car or lived in a mansion. He was an electrical engineer who had worked for the same company for nearly 30 years. After retiring, he continued consulting part-time because he hated sitting around the house. But Dad understood money. He believed in buying things you could afford, avoiding unnecessary debt, and investing patiently. When I was 26, he sat me down at his kitchen table. "You're young," he told me. "You don't need much money right now. You need time." He helped me open a brokerage account and taught me how to invest. Every month I put something into it. Sometimes it was $200, sometimes $50, sometimes nothing. But I kept going. Over the years, the account grew. When I married Daniel, I never considered it our money. It was mine. Not because I didn't trust my husband, because Dad had taught me something important. Marriage should be a partnership, but independence isn't betrayal. Daniel knew I had investments. He just didn't know how much they had grown, and I had never felt the need to tell him. Not because I was hiding something, because money had never been the center of our relationship. At least I thought it wasn't. That changed after the slap. Around 10 that morning, Daniel finally called. I watched his name appear on my screen. I didn't answer immediately. When I did, I said, "Hello, Claire." His voice sounded tired. "I've been thinking about last night." "So have I. Mom shouldn't have hit you." I said nothing. She was angry. "That doesn't excuse it." "I know. No, Daniel, you don't." He was quiet. I could hear traffic in the background. Then he said, "Can we talk tonight?" "I don't know. Claire, please." I closed my eyes. "Daniel, I need some space. Are you leaving me?" The question caught me off guard. "No." "Then what are you doing?" "Trying to figure out what I want my life to look like." He didn't respond. Finally, he said, "I'll give you some time." We hung up. I thought that was the end of the conversation. It wasn't. That afternoon, my bank called. There was a problem with one of the cards connected to our household account. I immediately knew what had happened. Evelyn had been using a card that I had originally helped set up for shared family expenses. It wasn't her personal bank account. It was an authorized card connected to an account Daniel and I managed for household spending. After what happened, I didn't want any connection to it anymore. I called the bank. I'd like to remove an authorized user and deactivate the card. The representative asked several security questions. Then she confirmed the change. The card would no longer work. I wasn't stealing anything. I wasn't taking money from Evelyn. I wasn't closing her bank account. I was simply ending access to a card that I had the legal authority to manage. Still, I knew Evelyn would be furious. And she was. She called me less than an hour later. "You froze my card," I took a breath. "I deactivated a card connected to an account I manage." "You have no right, I do." "You're trying to punish me." "No." My voice surprised even me. "I'm trying to separate our finances. You think you're better than us now, no, Evelyn? Then why would you do this? Because I don't want to depend on you anymore." She went silent. Then she said something that revealed more than she intended. "You couldn't afford the life you have without Daniel." I looked around our house. For the first time, I realized how much of my life had been shaped by someone else's opinion. I said quietly, "You really don't know me at all." Then I ended the call. That evening I met with my father. He was sitting in his recliner with a blanket over his legs. He looked healthier than he had the previous day, but I could still see the exhaustion in his face. "You look upset," he said. "I'm okay. Dad gave me the look fathers give daughters when they know they're being lied to." "Claire." I smiled weakly. "I had a fight with Daniel and his mother." "What happened?" I hesitated. Then I told him. "Everything." When I finished, Dad stared at the floor. "She hit you." "Yes." "And Daniel did nothing. He told me to go home." Dad nodded slowly. "Then maybe going home was exactly what you needed." I looked at him. I don't want a divorce. I didn't say divorce." He leaned back. "I said you need to decide what home means." Those words stayed with me. That night I opened my investment account again. The balance was larger than I remembered. Much larger. Dad had helped me invest for years, and the market had been kind to us. There was also something else. A property investment Dad had made decades earlier had recently been sold, and I was the beneficiary of a trust he had established for me. The amount wasn't unlimited, but it was enough to give me choices I had never imagined. I called a financial advisor the next morning. We reviewed everything carefully: taxes, liquidity, long-term investments, my father's trust, my retirement. After several hours, I asked one question. If I wanted to buy a house without putting myself in financial danger, what price range would make sense? The advisor studied the numbers. "That's ultimately your decision," she said. "But you have enough assets to consider a high-value property without destroying your financial security." I nodded. For the first time since the slap, I felt something other than anger. I felt calm. Then I opened a real estate website. I wasn't looking for revenge. At least that's what I told myself. I was looking for a new beginning, a place where nobody could tell me I didn't belong. I searched neighborhoods with good schools, quiet streets, mature trees, and reasonable property taxes. Then I saw it. A beautiful 2-story brick home with a wide front porch, mature oak trees, a 3-car garage, and enough privacy to feel like a retreat. The asking price was just under $2 million. I stared at the listing. Then I looked at the address. My stomach tightened. I recognized the street. I zoomed in on the map. There was no mistake. The house was directly across the street from Evelyn Carter. I leaned back in my chair. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I whispered, "Well, that's interesting." And for the first time since she slapped me, I smiled. Not because I wanted to hurt her, because I suddenly realized I didn't have to run away from anyone. I could build a life on my own terms, even if that life happened to begin right across the street. 3 days later, I stood inside that house for the first time. The realtor Melissa was talking about hardwood floors and the renovated kitchen, but I barely heard her. I was looking through the front windows. Across the street stood Evelyn's house. The same white columns, the same stone walkway, the same flower beds she spent hours maintaining. I almost laughed. Not because I wanted to torment her, because life had a strange sense of humor. Melissa noticed me staring. "You know someone in the neighborhood?" I smiled. Something like that. The house was beautiful. It had 4 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms, a large kitchen, a home office, a finished basement, and a backyard surrounded by mature trees. But the thing I liked most wasn't the size. It was the feeling. For the first time in years, I could imagine coming home and feeling completely safe. I made an offer. The seller accepted 2 days later. I hired an attorney and a financial advisor to review everything before signing. I wasn't about to make an emotional decision with $2 million. Once every number was checked, I signed the papers. The closing attorney handed me the keys. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett." I held them in my palm. For a moment I thought about my father, then I thought about Evelyn telling me I had nothing without her family. I almost wished she could see me now. Not because I wanted her approval, because I wanted her to understand how wrong she had been. I moved in quietly. No party, no announcement, no social media post. Just a moving truck arriving on a Tuesday morning. The first person to notice was Evelyn. I was carrying a box of books through my front door when I heard her voice from across the street. "Claire." I looked up. She was standing at the edge of her driveway. Her face had gone completely still. "What are you doing?" I set the box down. "Moving in. Here?" "Yes." She stared at the house, then at me. "You bought the—" "Yes." With what money I could hear the disbelief in her voice. "My own." She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind people use when reality doesn't fit the story they've been telling themselves. "You're lying." "No, how much did you pay?" I didn't answer. She walked closer. "Claire, this house is worth millions, I know. Who gave you the money?" "My father left me a trust." Her expression changed. For the first time I saw something besides anger. Surprise. Maybe even fear. "You never told Daniel." "I didn't think it was necessary." "He's your husband." "Yes, and you hid this from him." "I didn't hide anything. He knew I had investments, but not this." "No." She folded her arms. "So you bought this house to show me you have money?" I looked at her. "No." "Then why here?" I glanced across the street. "Because I liked the house." She shook her head. "You expect me to believe that I—" smiled gently. "You don't have to believe me." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she turned around and walked away. That evening, Daniel came over. He stood on my porch looking completely stunned. "You actually did it?" "Yes." "You bought a $2 million house?" "I did." He looked across the street. Mom is furious, I figured. "Claire, why didn't you tell me about the trust?" I opened the front door. "Come inside." He followed me into the living room. We sat across from each other. "I didn't tell you because I never wanted money to become part of our marriage." Daniel looked down. "You trusted me enough to marry me, but not enough to tell me that isn't what this is about." "Then what is it about?" I took a breath. "Because your mother has always believed money gives her authority over everyone around her." Daniel didn't answer. "And I didn't want my finances to become another weapon." He rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything." We sat quietly. Finally, Daniel asked, "Are you leaving me?" "I don't know." That answer hurt him. I could see it. But I wasn't going to lie anymore. "I love you," I said. "But love doesn't mean I accept everything." He nodded slowly. "I know Mom was wrong. You watched her hit me." His face tightened. "I know. You told me to leave." I was scared. Of her, yes. I stared at him. That was the saddest answer he could have given me. A grown man, a husband, scared of his mother. "I can't live like that," I said. "I know." He stood. "I'll talk to her. I don't need you to fight with her." "Then what do you need?" "I need you to stop letting her decide how you treat me." He nodded. "I'll try." "No." He looked at me. "Don't try." I paused. "Choose." He didn't answer. He left shortly afterward. The next morning I was sitting on my front porch drinking coffee when a dark sedan stopped outside Evelyn's house. A woman I didn't recognize stepped out. She carried a folder. Evelyn met her at the front door. They talked for several minutes. Then the woman pointed toward my house. I wasn't sure what was happening. Later that afternoon, I received an email from the Homeowners Association. There had been a complaint about my property. Apparently, someone believed the landscaping work I had scheduled violated neighborhood rules. I read the complaint twice. It wasn't a major issue. The contractor simply needed to adjust the timing of the work. I handled it. But then another complaint arrived. Then another. One concerned my driveway, another concerned outdoor lighting. Then there was a complaint about a delivery truck. None of them were serious, but together they told me exactly what was happening. Evelyn was trying to make my life difficult. I didn't confront her. Instead, I documented everything. Dates, emails, letters, names. Not because I wanted revenge, because I had learned something important. When emotions get loud, paperwork becomes your friend. A week later, Daniel called. Mom says you're harassing her. I nearly laughed. I'm sitting in my house. She says you bought the place just to intimidate her. Daniel, I haven't spoken to her in days. I know. Then why are you calling me? He sighed. Because I don't know what to do. I looked across the street. Evelyn was standing behind her curtains, watching me. I lowered my voice. You need to decide whether you're going to keep being the messenger. What do you mean if your mother has something to say to me, she can say it herself? He was quiet. Then he said, She's calling the HOA again. Let her. You're not angry, I was. And now, I looked around my new living room, at the boxes, the sunlight coming through the windows. The quiet. No, I said. I'm building my life. That night, I unpacked the last box. It contained old photographs, one of my father, one of me as a little girl, one of my parents standing in front of their first house. I placed the photographs on a shelf. Then I heard something outside. A car door slammed. I looked through the window. 2 police officers were standing across the street, at Evelyn's front door. I froze. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Then one officer raised his hand and knocked. 3 slow knocks. Evelyn opened the door. She looked directly toward my house, and this time I knew something had changed. I stood behind my living room window watching the 2 police officers speak with Evelyn. For a moment I wondered if I should cross the street. Then I stopped myself. That wasn't my business. Whatever had brought those officers to her door had nothing to do with me, at least that's what I believed. The next morning I found out otherwise. My phone rang at 8:17 a.m. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello, Ms. Bennett. This is Officer Harris with the Wake County Sheriff's Office. I stopped by your mother-in-law's home last night. My stomach tightened. Yes, I'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident that occurred several weeks ago. I knew immediately what he meant. The night Evelyn slapped me. What kind of questions? Nothing complicated. We received a complaint involving a vehicle and an alleged unauthorized use of that vehicle. I stared across the street. Evelyn's curtains were closed. I returned the vehicle, I said. That isn't exactly what we were told. I sat down. What were you told? Officer Harris paused. Mrs. Carter reported that you took her SUV without permission and refused to return it. I almost laughed. She gave me the keys. She says otherwise. I have the text messages. That's helpful. Could you send those to me? Yes. I opened my phone and found the conversation. There it was. My message. Dad is sick. My car won't start. Could I borrow your SUV? And Evelyn's response. Fine. Just bring it back tonight. I forwarded the screenshots. A few minutes later, Officer Harris called again. That clears up the vehicle issue. Then why are you investigating? We also received a complaint alleging that you threatened Mrs. Carter after moving into the neighborhood. I closed my eyes. I never threatened her. Do you have any messages between you and Mrs. Carter after the move? Yes, please send those too. I did. There were only a few. Most were from her. You need to stop watching my house. You bought that property to intimidate me. I will not tolerate harassment. My responses were short. I'm not watching your house. Please don't contact me unless necessary. I want us to have reasonable boundaries. Officer Harris reviewed everything. Then he said, Ms. Bennett, based on what you've provided, I don't see evidence that you threatened her. I exhaled. Thank you. There is one other matter. What Mrs. Carter told us, you purchased your house with money obtained from an account she controlled. I stared at the wall. She said that, yes. That isn't possible. That's what we need to establish. I opened my laptop. I can provide the closing documents. That would be useful. By noon, I had sent the officer everything. The purchase agreement, bank statements, investment records, the trust documentation from my father's attorney, the wire transfer confirmation. Everything was legitimate. Everything was documented. And for the first time, I understood why keeping good records mattered. Anger could be denied. Memory could be disputed. But documents didn't get emotional. They simply told the truth. That afternoon, Daniel came to my house. He looked exhausted. "What happened?" I asked. He stepped inside. "Mom called me last night." "What did she say?" "She said the police came because you were trying to ruin her life?" I shook my head. "They came because she made a report." Daniel looked at me. "She says you're trying to make her look crazy." "I don't want to make her look like anything." "Then why did you send the messages to the police? Because they asked for them." He rubbed his face. "I don't know what's happening anymore." I looked at him carefully. "Daniel, do you remember what happened the night she hit me?" He swallowed. "Yes." "Did I threaten her?" "No." "Did I attack her?" "No." "Did I steal her car?" "No." "Then why are we having this conversation?" He didn't answer. I walked toward the kitchen. "Coffee." He nodded. We sat at the island. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel said, "Mom thinks you're trying to take me away from her." I looked at him. "I'm not trying to take you anywhere. She says you have changed. I have." He looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I finally realized I was trying too hard to be accepted by someone who had already decided she didn't like me." Daniel stared into his coffee. "She wasn't always like this. Maybe not. She raised me. I know. She sacrificed a lot for me. I know that too." He looked up. "And I feel like I'm betraying her." I softened. "Daniel, loving your mother isn't betrayal." He waited. "Protecting someone when they're wrong isn't love." He looked down again. "I should have stopped her. Yes. I should have defended you. Yes. I was afraid of what she'd do. I know." He looked at me. "Can you forgive me?" I didn't answer immediately. "I can forgive you," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." He nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you? I think I'm starting to." That evening, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from the sheriff's office. The investigation into the alleged vehicle theft and harassment had found no evidence that I had committed a crime, but there was a note asking me to contact them if Evelyn continued making allegations that were demonstrably false. I placed the letter in a folder. Then I put the folder in my desk. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. A family had reached the point where police officers were knocking on doors because nobody could communicate like adults anymore. That wasn't victory. That was tragedy. The next morning, Evelyn's attorney contacted me. He wanted to discuss a neighborhood dispute. I agreed to speak with him only through my attorney. My lawyer reviewed everything. Then she told me something I hadn't considered. "You don't have to fight every accusation," she said. "Sometimes the strongest response is documentation and distance." I nodded. "I don't want revenge." "Good," she said. "Because revenge usually creates more problems than it solves." That sentence stayed with me. For the first time, I questioned what I had been doing. Had I really bought the house because I loved it? Or had some part of me wanted Evelyn to look across the street every morning and remember that she had underestimated me I didn't know? Maybe both were true. But there was one thing I did know. I wasn't going to become the kind of person who hurt others simply because they had hurt me. That night I stood on my front porch. Across the street, Evelyn's house was dark. Then a light came on. Her front door opened. She stepped outside. For a moment we looked directly at each other. Neither of us spoke. Then Evelyn turned away. And I realized something. The woman who had once made me feel powerless no longer had that power. Not because I had destroyed her, not because I had beaten her at her own game, but because I had finally stopped asking her to decide my worth. I went inside. But I had no idea that the following week would force Evelyn to face something much bigger than a family argument, something involving money control and a secret Daniel had never known about. And when he finally discovered the truth, he would have to decide whose side he was really on. The secret Daniel discovered wasn't hidden in some mysterious safe or buried inside an old family box. It was sitting in plain sight. It was in the bank statements. And once Daniel saw those numbers, he finally understood why his mother had spent so many years convincing him that Claire was the problem. 3 days after the police investigation ended, Daniel came to my house carrying a thick folder. He looked different. Not angry, not confused, just tired. I opened the door. "What's wrong?" He held up the folder. "I need to talk to you." I stepped aside. "Come in." He sat at the kitchen table and placed the folder in front of him. For a few seconds he didn't open it. Then he said, "Mom lied to me." I didn't respond. He opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, old emails, and documents from a business account Daniel had once shared with his mother. "I found these in her home office," he said. "I wasn't looking for them. She asked me to find an old insurance document." He pushed one statement toward me. "I found out she was moving money around." I studied the document. It wasn't anything illegal, but it showed something important. For years, Evelyn had told Daniel that she was helping him financially because Claire wasn't contributing enough. But the records told a different story. Some of the money Evelyn had described as family support had actually come from Daniel's own business account. She had moved money between accounts without explaining what she was doing. Daniel looked ashamed. "She always told me you were careless with money." I looked at him. "She told me that too. She said you were going to spend everything your father left you." I shook my head. "She didn't know what my father left me." Daniel stared at me. "She knew more than you thought." He reached into the folder and pulled out another document. It was a letter from my father's attorney. I recognized it immediately. It was part of the trust documentation. I looked at Daniel. "How did you get this? Mom had a copy." I felt a cold sensation in my chest. "Why, I don't know." He lowered his eyes. "She apparently found out about the trust months ago." I sat back. Suddenly so many conversations made sense. The questions, the comments, the way Evelyn had started asking about my finances, the way she had insisted Daniel needed to protect his future. She hadn't been guessing. She knew, and she had been using that information to influence him. Daniel's voice broke. "She told me you were hiding money from me because you planned to leave." I stared at him. "Did you believe her for a while?" That hurt more than I expected. "Daniel." "I know." He rubbed his eyes. "I was stupid. You were manipulated. I still made the choices." "Yes." He nodded. "I don't want to make excuses anymore." We sat in silence. Then he said something I had been waiting 8 years to hear. "I should have defended you." I looked at him. "You should have. I should have stopped Mom when she hit you." "Yes." "I should have told her she couldn't speak to you like that." "Yes." "I should have trusted my wife." I swallowed. "Yes." He looked directly at me. "I'm sorry." This time I believed him. But belief wasn't the same as forgetting. I reached across the table. "I accept your apology." His shoulders dropped slightly. "Does that mean we're okay?" "No." His face fell. "It means we're starting to be honest." He nodded. "I can live with that." That afternoon I called my father. I told him what had happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Money has a strange way of revealing people's character. I wish I had never told them about the trust." "You didn't." "I didn't." "No, someone else did." I understood what he meant. Dad sighed. "Claire, don't let what your mother-in-law did turn you into someone you don't recognize." "I won't. You don't have to punish her." "I know. Let consequences do what they do." His words were simple, but they stayed with me. The following week, Evelyn requested a meeting. She wanted Daniel there. She wanted me there. And she wanted her attorney present. I almost refused. My lawyer advised me that if I attended, I should keep the conversation calm and documented. So I agreed. We met in a quiet conference room at a local law office. Evelyn sat across from me. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small, not weak, just tired. Her attorney spoke first. "There have been misunderstandings between the parties." I almost smiled. Misunderstandings. That was a polite word for years of resentment. I looked at Evelyn. "Did you ask the police to investigate me?" She looked away. Yes. Why? I thought you were trying to hurt me. I never threatened you. I know that now. Did you know I had permission to borrow the SUV? She nodded. Yes. Then why did you tell the police I stole it? Her eyes filled with tears. I was angry. That isn't an answer. No, she whispered. It isn't. Daniel looked at his mother. Mom, why did you do this? She didn't answer. He continued. Why did you tell me Claire was hiding money from me? Evelyn's hands trembled. I thought she was going to leave you. That still doesn't answer the question. I was afraid of what that I'd lose my son. The room became silent. Evelyn looked at me. You had everything. I frowned. What did I have? My son, his loyalty, his future. I shook my head. I never took Daniel away from you. You didn't have to. Her voice broke. He chose you. I realized then that this wasn't really about the car. It wasn't about the house. It wasn't even about the money. Evelyn had spent years believing that loving her son meant controlling his choices, and when Daniel chose me, she saw it as losing. I spoke quietly. You don't have to lose your son. She looked at me. But you do have to stop trying to own him. Tears rolled down her face. I don't know how. That was the first honest thing she had said to me in years. I didn't hug her. I wasn't ready for that. But I didn't attack her either. Instead I said, then learn. The meeting ended without a dramatic reconciliation. There was no magical apology that erased 8 years. There were agreements, boundaries, no more financial interference, no more false accusations, no more showing up uninvited, and most importantly, no more physical violence. Daniel agreed to begin counseling. Evelyn agreed to speak with someone about her fear of losing control. As I drove home, I looked at the house across the street. The house that had once felt like revenge now felt different. It wasn't a weapon, it was simply my home. That evening, Daniel stood beside me on the porch. Do you regret buying this place? I looked across the street. No, even after everything I smiled, especially after everything. He took my hand. I want to do this right. I squeezed his fingers. Then start with the truth. He nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we might actually have a chance, not to return to the marriage we had before, but to build something better. Something neither of us had known how to build before. 3 months after the night Evelyn slapped me, I stood on my front porch with a cup of coffee in my hands and watched the sunrise. Across the street, her house was quiet. For a long time, that house had represented everything I hated: control, judgment, fear. But that morning, it simply looked like a house. And somehow that was how I knew I had finally moved on. My father had recovered enough to return to his normal routine. He still had follow-up appointments, and I still worried about him, but he was back to complaining about the weather and arguing with his doctors about how much walking was too much. One Saturday morning he came over to my house carrying a paper bag. What did you bring? Donuts? You're supposed to be watching your blood sugar. I am. I looked inside the bag. There are 6 donuts. I only plan to eat 1. You always say that. Dad smiled. Then don't buy 6 next time. We laughed. For the first time in months, life felt ordinary again. Daniel and I had also changed. We weren't magically perfect. We had started marriage counseling, and some conversations were painful. There were nights when Daniel admitted things he had never admitted before. He told me how his mother had controlled him when he was young, how she used guilt whenever he disagreed with her, how every decision became a test of loyalty, and he finally understood that avoiding conflict wasn't the same thing as keeping peace. Sometimes avoiding conflict simply allowed the loudest person to control everyone else. One evening after counseling, Daniel and I sat on the back porch. I used to think being a good son meant never disappointing Mom, he said. And now I think being a good son means loving her without letting her control my life. I smiled. That sounds healthier. He looked at me. I should have learned that years ago, maybe? He took my hand. But I'm learning now. That was enough for me. We weren't trying to erase the past. We were learning from it. Then one Sunday afternoon I heard a knock on my front door. I opened it. Evelyn was standing there, alone. No Daniel, no lawyer, no angry expression, just Evelyn. She looked nervous. Can I come in? I didn't answer immediately. The old version of me would have invited her inside before she finished asking. The new version of me thought carefully. Why? She took a breath. Because I want to apologize. I stepped aside. Come in. She walked into the foyer and looked around. Her eyes moved across the walls, the photographs, the furniture. Then she stopped. You made this place beautiful. Thank you. She nodded. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said I was wrong. I looked at her. She swallowed. About the car. I waited. About the police. Another pause. About your money. She looked down. And about you. Those words landed differently than I expected. I had spent months imagining what I would say if she ever apologized. I had imagined something dramatic. Something powerful. Instead, all I could say was, thank you. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. I was so afraid of losing Daniel. You almost did. I know. She sat down. I thought if I controlled everything around him, I could keep him safe. You weren't protecting him. I know that now. She wiped her eyes. I was hurting him. I sat across from her. And me. She nodded. Yes. Then she said something I didn't expect. I was jealous of you. I frowned. Why? Because Daniel listened to you. I was quiet. He trusted you, she continued. And I thought that meant he trusted me less. I shook my head. Love isn't a pie, Evelyn. You don't lose a piece every time someone loves another person. She gave a sad little smile. I wish someone had told me that years ago. Maybe someone did. She laughed softly. Maybe I wasn't listening. We sat there for several minutes. Then Evelyn looked at me. I can't undo what I did. No, I can't take back the things I said. No, and I can't pretend the slap never happened. No. She nodded. I understand. That was important. She wasn't asking me to forget. She wasn't asking me to excuse her. She was acknowledging the damage. Finally, she stood. I should go. I walked her to the door. Before she stepped outside, I said, Evelyn. She turned. I forgive you. Her eyes filled again. But forgiveness doesn't mean you get the same access to my life you had before. She nodded. I understand. And if we're going to have a relationship, there will be boundaries. Yes, no surprise visits. Yes. No financial interference. Yes, and you will never put your hands on me again. She looked directly into my eyes. Never. Then she left. I watched her cross the street. For the first time, I didn't feel victorious. I felt relieved. A week later, Daniel came home and found me making dinner. Mom came over, I nodded. What happened? We talked. He looked nervous. Are you okay? Yes. What did she say? She apologized. He smiled. Really? Really? He walked over and hugged me. I'm proud of you. I laughed. You should be proud of your mother, too. He looked surprised. Why? Because apologizing isn't easy. He nodded. Maybe that was the real ending to the story. Not the $2 million house, not the frozen card, not the police. Those were simply the things people would remember because they were dramatic. But the real victory had been quieter. I had learned that boundaries were not cruelty. Financial independence was not selfishness, and forgiveness was not weakness. A few weeks later, Evelyn invited us to dinner. I hesitated. Daniel didn't pressure me. You don't have to go. I thought about it. Then I said, okay. Dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments. There were silences. But there was no yelling, no insults, no manipulation. At one point, Evelyn looked across the table at me. I never thought I'd say this, she said, but I'm glad you're my daughter-in-law. I smiled. And I'm glad you're trying. That was enough. We weren't suddenly best friends. We didn't erase the past. We simply stopped allowing the past to control the future. Months later, I sometimes stood on my porch and looked across the street. I remembered the night Evelyn had shouted, "Get out and never come back." At the time, those words felt like rejection. Now I saw them differently. She had told me to leave. And I had. I left the version of myself that constantly begged to be accepted. I left the fear of disappointing people. I left the belief that keeping peace meant keeping quiet. And I built something new. Not just a $2 million house. A life. A life where my father was safe, where my husband was learning to stand on his own, where my mother-in-law finally understood that love couldn't be built through control, and where I finally understood that revenge wasn't the greatest victory. Peace was. If this story touched something in you, maybe because you've had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your dignity, remember this: you can forgive someone without giving them permission to hurt you again. You can walk away without becoming bitter, and sometimes the strongest response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's becoming so secure in who you are that the person who tried to break you no longer has the power to define you. If you enjoyed this story, take a moment to share it with someone who may need that reminder today. And if you believe that dignity, forgiveness, and second chances can change a family, consider subscribing for more stories like this. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are tonight, I hope you remember one thing. You don't have to destroy someone to prove that they were wrong about you. Sometimes the most powerful ending is simply building a better life.